Trump-era immigration policy will likely be resuming next month under the Biden administration. The Remain in Mexico policy, officially known as Migrant Protection Protocols, makes asylum seekers wait for their U.S. immigration hearing on the Mexican side of the border. Now, this is a policy President Joe Biden ended on his first day in office. Now his administration faces legal challenges after being sued by both Texas and Missouri for removing it. Here to discuss the potential impacts of this policy and what legal challenges are at stake are Susan Zesch, senior instructional professor at the University of Chicago and counsel to law firm Hughes, Sokol, Piers, Resnick and Dem, and Helena Olea, associate director for programs at Asylum-seekers, a coalition of immigrant-led organizations with a regional presence in Chicago and Central America. Thanks to you both for joining us. Susan Zesch, let's start with you, please. So Biden originally declared this Trump-era policy as inhumane. So walk us through briefly, if you can, why he's resuming it.
Well, he's not resuming it exactly voluntarily. The district court in Texas, in a very unusual move, because courts almost never intervene in matters of foreign policy or presidential discretion concerning the borders, ordered that the Biden administration reinstate it. And that's an injunction. In other words, while the lawsuit's going ahead. The Fifth Circuit upheld the district court's order and the Supreme Court upheld it also. So the Biden administration has to reinstate it in good faith, is what the terms of the order are. That's the beginning, but there's also a very interesting back and forth, almost a ping pong match going on across the border with Mexico, because this really is a piece of foreign policy and not just U.S. domestic policy.
Absolutely. And we're going to come back to the Mexican government in just a bit. I want to bring Helena Olea in. You visited the border as part of Asylum-seekers. What impacts have you seen this policy have on the lives of migrants at the border?
For all practical purposes, the MPP creates refugee camps in Mexico of individuals who are seeking protection in the U.S. and who are sent back to wait in Mexico in unsanitary conditions and unsafe conditions. There have been a number of reports indicating the number of individuals who are disappeared, who are killed, women who are raped as they are waiting at the other side of the border, living in tents in unsanitary, unsafe conditions. So there is no reason why this policy was ever in place, and it's a violation of international human rights.
Susan, back to you. So as you mentioned, this policy hinges on the approval also of the Mexican government. What can you tell us right now about the state of Mexican-U.S. relations?
Well, we saw during the Trump administration that Mexico was willing to do pretty much anything the U.S. asked under the threat of economic sanctions. We're not exactly sure from this side what's going on there, but I've spoken with Mexican colleagues who are migrant and refugee advocates there, and they have filed a lawsuit urging the Mexican government not to cooperate. Mexico said its cooperation is based on the idea that people, if they're allowed, if they come back to Mexico, that they will have counsel representing them in the hearings in the U.S. In other words, they're trying to make a play for some kind of decency in the way these asylum seekers are treated. But a list of about 83 U.S. legal services organizations have told the Biden administration that they are not going to cooperate in providing counsel to people. Lawyers were in as much danger almost as the migrants in these unregulated, informal camps on the Mexico side of the border, trying to meet with their clients and talk to them about their cases. Due process is non-existent and for a Texas district court judge to basically order the Mexican government to do something is offensive to Mexico's sovereignty. So the advocacy community within Mexico is trying to stiffen the spine of their own government and say that we're not going to cooperate in something which is such an outrageous violation of international law. I'm not sure if they'll succeed, but it's nice to know that there are efforts on both sides of the border protesting the lack of fundamental decency and the illegality of what the MPP program actually is.
And Helena, how does this policy affect the likelihood of asylum seekers having their cases heard in the U.S. If this is re-implemented?
What we have seen in the past is that the policy creates all type of violations to due process rights. Individuals are unable to find counsel, do not receive the psychological therapy and treatment that they need, and that undermines the possibility of success of their asylum claims. In many cases, they lose precious evidence that is fundamental to any chances of them winning the cases. So if the policy is re-implemented, that we can foresee that there's not going to be legal representation, that there's going to be, undermining the basic rights of those individuals waiting. They are uninformed of the date when a hearing is going to be taking place. As in some cases, they are requested to attend a following up hearing, but when they arrive at the border, they find out that that's not the date of the hearing. Individuals die in the process, as I said, as a result of violence, and the likelihood of winning a case is of less than 1%. And those are the statistics as the program has been running in the past. This is no asylum program at all.
So some pretty deplorable conditions, and obviously it sounds like diminished chances. Susan, what changes to the policy are needed in order to address the concerns of the immigration lawyers and the advocates?
And the refugees, really the most important. But during the period when the Biden administration was starting to dismantle the program, they were allowing I think it's up to 11,000 people who had been part of the 68,000 people told to remain in Mexico proceed into the United States under parole status. And some of them have come to Chicago, for example, and National Immigrant Justice Center is now representing them so that they can have full and fair hearings on their asylum claims. So there's a way to test people for COVID at the border. There's a way to monitor them coming in. And what comparable harm the states of Texas and Missouri can be pleading that compares at all to the harm suffered by these desperate families? I just don't understand what was in the mind of the judge who issued that order.
A lot more to come on this. We'll have to leave it there. My thanks to Susan Zesch and Helena Olea for explaining this to us.
Thank you.